I think that they're messing in a world which is messy and complicated, PR and reputation management, and I'm not sure they're doing it as skillfully as they ought to be, considering the teams they have on their side.
Well, Jonathan, it is always great to see you as always. And we have a ton to get to this week, a lot of news to get to. Kicking it off with that UN speech from Prince Harry. What was your reaction to that? Were you surprised that it got pretty political?
I mean, I can't say I was surprised, bearing in mind he's making a habit of this, but I certainly wasn't impressed. And I think that the reason for that is that Prince Harry made out that he really wanted to kind of duck out of this royal circus, that he felt he was trapped in something a bit like the Truman Show, and that his brother and his father also were. And, you know, I get that. I think most of us do. It must be a very weird life to be born into. You don't get any say in it. And he tried to have a say in it by saying he wanted out. But then the guy's just gone around really trading off that royal status. You know, why was he speaking at the UN? Because he's Prince Harry. Otherwise, without meaning to be too offensive, no one would be interested in a guy who scraped through high school's opinion on world affairs. He has no qualifications to be discussing these issues. He's literally completely unqualified to have anything important to tell to people, but instead he's using his position as somebody in the British royal family to spread what he sees as an important message. Now, I'm not disputing whether it's an important message or not, but I am disputing whether or not he's really got any right to be spreading it to us at the same time as having told us he doesn't like the attention of being a royal. And I think that some of his defenders will say, well, he does like the attention when he can put it to good use for good causes and what have you, and in memory of good people like Nelson Mandela. But again, I think that there are protocols for how the royal family, the British royal family, operates. So if you want to use the status of being part of that royal family for what you see as good causes and good ends, you have to obey their rules, because that's just kind of polite. That's just what you do when you're in that circumstance. And he's not doing that, because among the rules are they don't talk about politics, especially not politics of foreign countries. And that's exactly what he did. He stood up at the UN, effectively a political body, and gave a speech, including discussion of abortion rights in the United States. I mean, again, it doesn't matter what we think personally on these issues. It's just not the place of the British royal family to be making those sorts of comments. And Prince Harry has just shown an utter disregard for those sorts of protocols by continuing to trade on the royal name he has, the title he has, was introduced by his title. And I just think it's very unconvincing to most people. I'm not sure who is persuaded or convinced by somebody with as little qualification as him to comment on these issues, commenting on them, talking about democracy as somebody who's part of an aristocracy. I mean, the only reason we know about him is accident of birth and wealth. It's not because he's democratically elected. Nobody chose Prince Harry to be talking to us on these issues. I just think it's massively hypocritical. And again, I know I get a lot of criticism when I come on the show and I talk about him in such critical terms, but this is really like the pinnacle of his cheek, I think. Yeah. Him and Meghan, I mean, the UN, imagine going to the UN and trying to talk about the degradation of democracy and freedom. And you're a member of the British royal family. I'm not sure when he talked about, I mean, I jotted down a couple of the things he talked about. I mean, he compared Nelson Mandela's time in prison to a rough year that some of us might have had over the past year. Now, again, we've had a pretty rough year, don't get me wrong. We've lost relatives, friends, lots of people around the world to COVID. There's economic crisis, there's war. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison, not knowing if he'd get out. I'm not sure having a bad year when you live in a $14 million mansion is any way equivalent to that, and quite why you would think you're in a good position to tell us that you get it. So maybe I'm being cruel to the guy, but I wasn't convinced. There were lots of people I would have heard that message from who I would have been more persuaded by than Prince Harry.
Right. I think you make a good point. And we've talked about this before, that they're continuing trying to find their lane of what they want to do. Are you a celebrity? Are you a royal? Are you trying to mix both? And what's kind of your place in the world right now? And I think they're still trying to kind of figure that out. And like you said, kind of making a bit of some missteps along the way.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, never mind missteps along the way, I think that the whole plan, the whole strategy is sort of massively misguided. I just think I think their vision of what they put out there is massively different to the vision that people see when they look at them. I think they think they're this compassionate, well-meaning, warm-hearted couple, but over and over, we keep hearing rumors and stories and reports about some pretty horrible sounding behavior that's alleged to have happened from them. So we read about the opulence and the luxury of their lives. We see them enjoying massive luxury. Again, we see that in the royal family, don't get me wrong. The royal family live that way too. But to try and have the best bits and not any of the rules or the protocols that are there in part to mitigate that sense of hypocrisy and that sense of privilege and entitlement that the members of the royal family have, to bypass all those things and just go for the bits that they like, that get them invited to parties or not, as it happens, or make them famous, I think it's a massive mistake on their part. And I say that as much thinking about their reputation as anything else. Though I don't lose a lot of sleep worrying for them, I would say they're not doing themselves any favors. They just look like they have no idea what message they're putting out there. They're an extraordinarily wealthy couple who move in extraordinary circles that none of us will ever get close to. And yet they come and preach to us about the miseries of life, how tough things have been, and how they understand us. And I don't think it's convincing. I don't think they do understand ordinary people's difficulties. And I think that they should stop trying to convince us that they do, because there are plenty of people out there doing great work to help people in need and people in poverty and people who do need stuff. And I admire their will to do that if it's genuine. But I don't admire their desperate, the appearance at least of their desperate need for publicity, fame, celebrity, and the idea that we're all watching a sort of behind the scenes video before we get to see the real Netflix documentary. Right. That's the other weird thing about this. Every time we see one of these things, we think, oh, I wonder what this UN bit's going to look like in the Netflix propaganda version. And I wonder what this Queen's Jubilee is going to look like in the Netflix propaganda version. We might be all wrong, but that's how everyone's seeing every step they take. We're thinking ahead to what it's going to look like when they put out their official, authorized truth, as they would see it. And I think that's also just a massive problem. Everyone thinks we're watching them making a reality movie. Yeah. If they wanted to put that to bed, they could just duck out of the whole Netflix thing. But they won't do that, I suppose, because of the money it will bring them and because of the reputational cooking that they can do with it. They're going to try to put things how they want them to be seen in that. So I think that they're messing in a world which is messy and complicated, PR and reputation management, and I'm not sure they're doing it as skillfully as they ought to be, considering the teams they have on their side.